Which brings us to the next topic. We want to touch it briefly. We actually spoke a little bit about it last week. A gentleman by the name of Miguna Miguna, an opposition figure in Kenya who was deported twice now.
Twice.
At the time when we were having the conversation last week, he was somewhere in a bathroom, and you know, it's actually, we thought when he first tweeted that he was being held in a bathroom at the Kenyatta International Airport, we thought it was a joke, but when pictures came out, he was actually in the bathroom.
Precisely.
The same night or the next day, he was, we had that he had been forcefully put on the plane and flown to Dubai, where he spent a day, and then he's in Canada right now.
Actually, not just a day. I think he spent about 4 days in Dubai, and he alleged, for example, that he was sedated, he was injected with some kind of poison or whatever it was, which made him not being conscious until they arrived in Dubai. He didn't actually know where he was until they were actually getting out of the aircraft, and he said, where is this? Where are we? And the guy next to him, who happened to be a Kenyan security or civil or secret service personnel, said, we are in Dubai.
Unbelievable.
How did we get here? He said, well, we came with, United Emirates. Is it United Emirates?
Right. So he was in Kenya one night, and then he woke up and he was in Dubai.
In another country.
In another country.
Another continent.
Why, again, is the Kenyan government going at great length? And that's the question we actually had. We talked about this last week. Why is the Kenyan government, or Kenyatta's government, going to this great length to treat this man with this type of heavy-handedness?
It is obviously getting a lot of public relations battling, and I think that it has lost a lot in terms of the image, and yet this is a country, frankly, that benefits enormously in terms of attracting tourists. But I think that you should also look at Miguna Miguna's contribution. You remember that we said there was probably no need for the Kenyan government to behave the way it did, because it succeeded actually in making a huge political mountain, just like Mount Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa, out of a moral hill. And this is exactly where Miguna Miguna sits right now.
They basically elevated the profile of this gentleman.
That's true, but then there is also the other side. The government is saying that as far as the government is concerned, they did not actually deport Miguna Miguna. They said there was some kind of somebody who was, in their view, an undocumented alien, undocumented. Can you imagine a man who was being covered 24/7 on some of Kenya's major media platforms? We're talking about KTN, we're talking about Citizen Television, we're talking about Nation Media Group. He was featured in some of the major daily newspapers. We're talking about the Daily Nation. We're talking about the Standard, and all that kind of stuff. And you actually have the audacity to say that, as far as we are concerned, we didn't know that it was a Miguna Miguna, who obviously is one of us and was born in Kisumu County.
Right. And so this is actually one of the questions that it was our first question from Messi Tracy from Kigali, Rwanda, who asked you, Shaka, a second deportation for self-proclaimed General of National Resistance Movement of Kenya, Miguna Miguna, was it justifiable? Would it have happened if he had complied?
I think that ideally, if he had complied, he would have actually been received in Kenya. But you see, the government had a political interest. The government wanted to tie his hands behind his back and his feet together so that he could not politically punch. That's the reason why, because he actually flew on a Canadian passport. International law requires that you disembark on the same specific document that you traveled. And if you did, in his particular case, he would require a visa. And so the government was actually willing to give him a 6-month visitors or tourist visa. In the meantime, they sort out his citizenship problems, which really are not in contention, really. So
everybody knows Miguna is a Kenyan.
So it is more political, really,
right.
Than legal and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yet he himself really wanted to enter as a Kenyan on the basis of the fact that the Kenyan courts themselves had actually ruled that he be allowed back in Kenya unconditionally.
Right.
And he stood on that.
And the fact that he had been illegally deported.
Illegally deported, not to mention, by the way, that before he was deported,
right.
he actually was a candidate for the governor of Nairobi County.
Right.